Today we're going to discuss Chapter 8 in Geosystems Water Resources. Now when we look at Earth's water distribution, most of it is in the oceans and is salt water, and the vast majority is in the Pacific Ocean, which is the largest ocean on the planet. 97.2% of all water is in the ocean in the form of salt water. Only 2.8% of the water on the planet is fresh water, which is mostly 68.7% in ice sheets and glaciers. 30.1% is trapped in the ground, and only 0.9% is ground ice and permafrost. And only 0.3% of the water on the planet is liquid fresh water at the surface. So that's all of the lakes, rivers, ponds. 87% of that liquid fresh water is in lakes, 2% in rivers, and 11% in wetlands. The hydrologic cycle is where water evaporates from the planet, mostly in the ocean. Clouds form, clouds ascend and move up, causing precipitation. It rains, comes back to the land or the ocean, runs off, ends up eventually in the ocean, and starts again. So it's a cycle that is continuous over time. Surface water is water that runs off from precipitation. Some of it will evaporate, some of it will run off to streams, and some of it will infiltrate into the groundwater zone. Now, precipitation in North America very much depends on where you're at. The East Coast is wet, the Pacific Northwest is very wet, and the central part of the country is the drier part of our country. As you can see on this map, part of the country experiences droughts frequently in the desert Southwest, especially in California. Droughts are prolonged areas of lack of rain. When we look at surface water around the globe, you can see that all the continents have river systems that drain the rain that occurs over the continents. Sometimes people have to move water to more arid areas. For example, in California, they have several aquifers that bring fresh water from other places into the very urbanized part of California. Now, groundwater is a resource of water, which is water that is underneath the ground, where you dig wells to access the groundwater table. Groundwater is supplied by surface water that percolates through the soil. Approximately 700 kilometers cubed per year of groundwater is extracted by people. It's mostly used for irrigation and drinking water. It is clean, and it's not affected by short-term drought. So the water table is the area which separates soil from groundwater. And underneath, if you dug down under the surface, you're going to go through soil, you're going to hit a zone of saturation, and then you're going to hit some impermeable rock. Wells are where you dig down to this groundwater that you can extract. Now, the groundwater is added to by water that falls from the sky, collects in streams, and percolates down through the soil. In Texas, we have what's called the Ogallala Aquifer, which is the Central Plains area all the way from Nebraska to Texas, where there is a large aquifer underground that we are allowed to dig down and get water from. If you can see, we have been using this supply. With West Texas, there are areas that have had a reduction in the water table of up to 150 feet. So when we talk about the global water supply, because of usage, you can see the areas that have actually changed the water supply available to them. Like the entire Pacific coast all the way to Alaska, because of people using the water, there is less groundwater available for people to use. Now, our water supply, if we look at North America, we have approximately 484 million people, which is 6% of the global population, but we have 16% of the land and 15% of the annual stream flow. So most of America has a pretty hefty water supply. Other countries may have 10%, like in Europe, of the global population, but only 7% of the land and only 8% of the annual stream flow, which might mean that those areas might have a more difficult time with their water supply. When we look at global freshwater availability, you can see countries that are extremely arid, like in the desert in Africa, have a very scarce supply of global freshwater. Another issue that we have to worry about is keeping our water that we do have access to clean. Water does become polluted from homes, from crops and agriculture, from animals, from factories, and from suburban development and city streets. So we impact our water supply and the cleanliness of our water by our pollution.